an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Wintersteel, Cradle Book 8, Chapters 10 and 11. In these chapters, Eithan makes a deal with his mortal enemy to throw the competition. And, oh my God, you guys, I can't tell you how incredibly freaked out I was by Yaren's blood shadow. Ugh! I hated it. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andy for commissioning this episode. Welcome to everybody in the chat. There's a bunch of people here today. Again, y'all, cutting back on the number of chapters I'm covering per episode has definitely been the right decision. I actually ended on time last week, or earlier this week, I guess. No, last week. For the first time in ever, maybe. So I'm not regretting that decision, but it's really, really hard, and I hate it, and I'm mad about it, and I'm mad about it every time, and I'm like, this was a hard place to end, y'all. It really was. I'm going to start off talking about what's going on with Eithan, because Eithan's situation is a particular mystery, right? We get a little bit of information about what was going on here. But it's very vague, and we don't get more than the broad strokes of the people who had been involved in what happened. So Tiberian Aurelius had been the patriarch of Eithan's house. And from the way that Tiberian is described, he sounds very Lindon-y to me, especially based on the way that we see Lindon behaving later on with his team. Not only did he have unsurpassed talent in the sacred arts, mastering each technique with grace and skill, but he never stopped working. He was honest and straightforward to a fault, keeping his power under control, showing perfect deference to his superiors, and gracious mercy to those beneath him. And it says most storm paths are really only lightning paths, but the path of the raging sky harvests water, wind, and lightning aura in balance with one another. An interesting side effect, practitioners can adjust their mudra to bring one aspect or another to the forefront, so that it can often feel like facing three different paths, one of water, one of wind, and one of lightning, rather than a single unified set of techniques. That feels Lindon-y too. Now, granted, in his case, it's because he has two distinct cores, but the way that he has things in sort of this particular balance, it's very unusual. It just, I don't know. And it says, until his youngest advisor, a prodigy of their house, came forward to propose something more than an alliance, he had brought House Aurelius to a new era of prosperity, maintaining a tense balance of peace with their rival and neighbor House Shen. This advisor had violated family tradition and protocol to raid the tomb of their founding patriarch, the original Aurelius, which that is Osriel, right? We've established this. From this tomb, he brought relics of an unknown nature. Warning, information complete, continuing report. So, I'm wondering if one of the relics was the marble that Eithan now has. If there are others that still have survived that maybe Eithan knows about, maybe he doesn't. But, yeah, as a first step, Tiberian approached his neighbor Reigan Shen and proposed an alliance. Shen responded with violence. True battles between monarchs are rare, and this one destroyed much of the rose gold continent. In the end, even the weeping dragon was drawn in, and Tiberian was struck down, leaving House Aurelius leaderless and in ashes, which we see. Those ashes are very literal. It's not a metaphor. And this is like when I say the broad strokes, I mean it. The advisor was able to convince Tiberian to embark on an ambitious project, the elimination of the Dread Gods, the same task that resulted in the Dread War and the death of the previous generation of monarchs. He wants, all we get is, he tried to convince Tiberian to do this. Tiberian tried to get Reigan Shen to agree, and Reigan Shen responded with violence. We don't know exactly what Tiberian proposed. We don't know why Reigan Shen responded the way that he did, really. We know that Reigan Shen has this whole deal going on with, wanting something to do with the Dread Gods and teaming up with everybody else about it. His goal, I believe, has been to open the tunnels. Am I correct in that? Or something to do with that. I'm not even sure if we know for sure what his goal is here yet. But it's all really, really vague. And then we get suggested topic, the fate of House Aurelius. Error, topic unavailable, report complete. Which, warning information complete, error, topic unavailable. Obviously, whatever's going on with House Aurelius is in a state of such flux that the information is possibly it has been tampered with, and perhaps that was Osriel who is responsible for that. Perhaps it's fate being twisted up in the way that we know had already begun to happen earlier. It could be a combination. It could simply be Osriel's involvement at all, making things weirdly foggy. But overall, this feels like there's more to the story than we're hearing for sure. And Reigan Shen's goals are he certainly seems like a piece of shit, right? Reigan Shen isn't somebody that I think we're going to have to worry about. He's suddenly revealed to be a very reasonable person, and we all totally misjudged him. And wow. If only we'd known all along. He seems very much to be a power-hungry and smug type. But it's interesting that the project that Tiberian approached him about was the Dread Gods, when we know Reigan Shen has ongoing interest in that subject. And it's up in the air whether that interest was piqued by Tiberian and remains, or if he already had that interest and Tiberian came to him with an objective of doing something that was in opposition to his original goals. I suspect it's the second one, but it could be that Tiberian came to him, piqued his interest, and then he decided he wanted to do something different. That Tiberian just sort of brought to his attention an idea that was in direct opposition, and he was like, oh, you know what? Good idea. I'm going to do the opposite of that, but thanks for the tip. And I guess we will see. Maybe not. There's a lot of stuff in these books that it takes a couple books to reveal fully what happened. So I am not confident that we're going to get the answer to this mystery by the end of this book. It may not happen. I'm not mad about it if it doesn't. I'm still, I trust that things will be unveiled as I need to know them. So I'm going to go back to the beginning, to the spot where Eithan is in the ashes. And it's an interesting moment because I really thought Eithan was coming into this conversation with Reigan Shen knowing that Reigan Shen was fully aware of him and his role in things. But he is surprised at the fact that Reigan Shen recognizes and remembers him. And this is something that has come up several times already. Eithan works very hard to conceal his emotions and portray himself as this sort of sunny, unflappable agent of mischief, when we are inside his head and we know actually he feels things quite keenly and does have guilt, does have doubt. It's not like the way that he comes across to everyone. I think it's hard to say. I think he intends it to be mysterious in a way that's intimidating. I think he knows people find it irritating, and most of the time that works to his advantage because that irritation is coupled with them underestimating him. However, that conversation that he had with Lindon and Yaren, where she's basically like, I don't fucking trust you. I don't even know what you want. Like, you've never told us the truth or anything about yourself. I wanted to think that he took that to heart at the time. And I can't even be quite sure because we never, when we're in his head, really hear him thinking about that match. We hear the match. We are in his head for it. And we know that he does give it his all in that moment. But that's not the same thing as like being straightforward with them regarding their concerns. And I'm not sure if we're ever really going to get that out of him because, yeah, to a degree, I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of doesn't want them wholeheartedly trusting him. There's a feeling to him that he is attempting to get pieces into place because he wants them to do what they do, not because he makes them do a thing. So if they entirely trust him and look to him completely as a master, it's, I think, going to be kind of counter to his goals, which really are to create two fully independent, self-sufficient, separately operating, amazing sacred artists. I say two, focusing on Lindon and Yaren, I am assuming Mercy factors into that also, but I think she's a bit more of a wild card because of her monarch mother. You know, Lindon and Yaren don't have family, and they are completely at his disposal in a way that Mercy just isn't and can't really be. That is not to say that Mercy won't throw in with him later if she gains herself some more independence, but right now she's back with her family in a very official capacity, so who knows? All right, so he is, like I was starting to say before I tangented myself to death, really struggling to keep his cool. And this is true of the entire conversation with Reigan Shen. And this is something that we have seen from him a couple of times before, where he's thinking to himself, wow, if I lose control, I will get mad. And it's not like, ooh, I'm so mad and I have to keep from showing that. It's, if I lose control of myself, I will get mad. Which is really interesting because he's still thinking about how he would like Reigan Shen to be murdered. It's not like not being actively angry keeps him from wishing this man dead. That's not it at all. He absolutely is 100% like, oh no, yeah, I would love him dead. Please kill him. It'd be great for me. Although that's not really what he wants. But I just found it fascinating that he can simultaneously despise someone and fantasize about them being, their head being delivered on a platter, and also not be in the midst of rage. To me, that's really scary. You know, somebody who can divorce those two things from one another so completely, that is a type of control that I saw a meme today, and it said, emotions are like children. They shouldn't be driving the car, but they also shouldn't be stuck in the trunk, which is a pretty amazing analogy. And I feel like this is something that we saw a little bit also with the Sage of the Silver Heart and her talking about like separating her emotions from things and keeping herself from feeling, and how that's like part of becoming a sage is being able to pull your emotions out of things. And I know we've seen that with Suriel. Like there's been a couple of instances where she has actively chosen to let herself be scared, actively chosen to let herself feel grief. It is something that she gets a choice about. And it's really a fine line for me. I always have a problem when people talk about divorcing emotion from decision making because it makes you irrational. I have news for you guys. If you are divorcing emotions entirely from your argument, that is also irrational. If you can make a decision or an argument with no emotion involved, that means you have a problem connecting to the issue you're trying to talk about. Somebody else being emotional about something is not an indicator that they are the weaker in the argument, or that they have a less solid stance, or that they don't have their facts straight. Often that emotion is based on the fact that they are deeply invested in the argument. And there's too much these days equating logic with lack of emotion. Those are not the same thing, and nothing makes me quite as irritated as the suggestion that they are. It's a very patriarchal sort of stance to take, that like if you completely remove logic from something that means, or remove emotion from something that makes it coldly logical, it's so not true. And there are so many things in the human experience that require emotional connection and empathy for you to reach a logical conclusion about them, that the act of divorcing your emotion from it is in defiance of the subject matter itself. It's in defiance of the exact issue you're trying to talk about. And so I get very sort of like weird about the concept of being able to cut your emotions off the way that it's said sages can, and perhaps the way that Eithan can. Which is interesting because, like I said, the Sage of the Silver Heart suggests that this is something that once you ascend to a sage, you can do. And Eithan seems to have learned how to at least do a version of it already. And this is yet another indicator that he is more advanced than he maybe should be for where he is in his advancement. You know what I mean? Sorry, Evil One is saying it's been nearly 10 years. Eithan did want to feel some empathy, but he has gone through all the stages of grief. No. Evil, like, you're misunderstanding. I'm not talking about his reaction to the complete destruction of his homeland. I'm talking about in the midst of discussing things with Reigan Shen, he thinks about how he could get angry very easily right here if he let himself. It's a very immediate thing. And it's not the first time that we have heard him talk about his emotions in a distant sort of way, as if they're like accessories he can put on and off. And I'm certain it's to his advantage most of the time, because unfortunately, a lot of people respect when they cannot read someone else's emotions all over them. This is part of exactly what Yaren's going through with the Sage of the, was it Frozen Blade? Frozen Blade School. Sage of the Winter... can't remember now. But she's super emotional, and it's very immediately clear that Yaren has like lost respect for her due to the fact that her emotions are close to the surface. And it's a shame, because keeping your emotions like divorced from you as a human being makes for like a less full experience of your life. But it's simply true that hiding your emotions is one of the few ways to sort of ensure that your enemies don't exactly know what you think of something and can't use it against you, you know, because that's showing your cards a little bit. So when you're attempting to cultivate an air of mystery, when you're attempting to make it seem as if you are coldly logical or rational, hiding the way you actually feel is a very effective way of making that happen and getting that sort of reputation. So it's just one of those things that I'm extremely, I just have like a sort of gut reaction to the suggestion of separating emotions from yourself that may not actually be fair to what's happening, but I watch it, with a sort of leeriness. But yeah, so he's looking at this and like Eva was pointing out, the actual destruction, he tries to let himself feel it, but it's been so long since this happened. He can't even really muster the kind of emotional response that he sort of feels like he deserves a little bit, because it says he tried to use that image to let it remind him of the consequences of his own bad decisions. Super curious what that's about. I'm assuming he is the advisor from the notes that we just, we heard here, I guess, later on. But I don't know exactly how things shook out and what Reigan Shen's deal was, so I want to know the details there really bad. So Reigan Shen shows up, and this is when Eithan's like, this motherfucker. I really enjoy how, as much as he recognizes that this dude is shit and that he hates him, he is aware there's a greater picture here. He's trying to keep that in mind and put aside his grievance with this guy in favor of the overall larger situation. And they sit down, and it's right away. He's like, I'm here to buy you out of the tournament. And Eithan is 100% on board with doing this, which I won't say that it surprised me exactly, because we know that Eithan isn't somebody who's excited about following the rules. He always wants to do what he feels he should be able to do. He does not consider himself beholden to the same restrictions as other mortals. Part of that has to be because of the fact that he can see things the way that he can. But because I don't know his greater goals here, I was surprised at the agreements that he makes in exchange. So Reigan Shen here too, he says something about how his desires have only extended to this world, not beyond it. And it says that was almost enough to start Eithan shouting, but Shen continued in a melancholy tone. I've heard your arguments from Tiberian's mouth. Perhaps my people would be safer and happier if we had destroyed the dread gods. But they are safe, and they are happy, and I am here to guide them, and the heavens have offered me the means to achieve our goal, your goal, without abandoning my people. So, the fact that Eithan reacts the way that he does, where he's like, I would love to start screaming at you right now, suggests to me he does not believe Reigan Shen's assertion that his desires only extend to this world. It feels like he's holding back, being like, you piece of fucking lying shit. However, that may not be it. It feels like that to me, but there are many explanations for that kind of reaction. And then Eithan says, we both know that won't work. If you don't ascend, it will be for nothing. And Reigan Shen replies, it will buy us time to put new systems in place. You are not the only one who understands the nature of things. Shen's words sunk Eithan's spirits. It will buy us time. That was all they ever wanted. Stall tactics. No real solutions. Yes, millions of people will die, but still an acceptable number. It's not as if we're doing nothing. Perhaps we could reduce that number to 0, but it's too much risk, too much personal sacrifice. And this is extremely interesting to me. Eithan first saying, that's all they ever wanted. What's that? Who's they? Is that monarchs in general? What exactly do you mean by that? And then how could anyone justify leaving the dread gods alive even to themselves just because he would have to leave this world behind? So that could be even if you would die in the attempt, or even if it would be ascending to Abaddon and leaving behind like the planet that is your home. Either way, perhaps. I don't know that they're not exactly one and the same thing. They may be. But the fact that he is so passionate, this feels really strongly like, I can't believe how selfish y'all are. And it reminds me of the discussion that Lindon had with Charity about how, you know, yes, my grandmother was able to fight the Phoenix, but she lost a bunch of her holdings, and we don't know whether we lost more than we gained or not. Like, it's kind of too close to call. Is that what he means? And are those holdings... I had assumed that that included human life. I don't know that. But is that an example of what he means? That, like, her feeling like she doesn't want to fight again because she lost too many holdings. Is that what he's talking about when he's thinking this to himself? Because I really expected it to be, when the way Charity talked about it, like, yes, she protected us from that dread god, but a bunch of her people were left vulnerable in another place and they got. But it could be much more materialistic than that. And if so, that sucks. That's like, you know, I feel he's right in this moment. So to jump ahead, they go back and forth with their negotiations here. And they... first he asks for a void key to carry the ship that Reigan Shen gave him, which was a bit of like a joke, like shitty poking at him sort of thing, to not give him a void key to transport it in, like he knew Eithan was going to have trouble getting it out of the city. And he says, I want financial support and protection for House Aurelius. And Reigan Shen is like, okay, no problem. They're under my protection. Free to operate independent of my rule, I will honor their borders, give them support, including a restoration package of 1 billion scales, and Yushi will be at the service of your sage for 1 year beginning tonight. And Eithan is like, well, shit, that's actually better than I thought. That's cool. I guess he's ready to really do this. And then says, we require the attention of the root father. The condition of my homeland is as you see it. And this is apparently a dragon, who Reigan Shen puts up a big show of like, I don't command them. But this is clearly like, maybe you don't command them, but you have a clearly chummy relationship and you can make something happen. And he drops the pretense pretty quickly of trying to be like, what? I can't possibly. What do you... They move on fairly soon from that, and he agrees to it. And then Eithan says, I would like to ensure the Black Flame Empire is evacuated before the danger of the Dread Gods. And Reigan Shen's like, well, Malice is meant to do that. Don't you think she'll be able to handle it? And Eithan's like, she's going to be fighting the cults. And BT Dubs, they're under your banner. She's going to be a little bit distracted. So I really want to make sure that these people are taken care of, because it won't hurt to give her one less thing to fucking manage. And let's see. And then neither House Aurelius nor the Black Flame Empire can appropriately subsidize my advancement. He says, I will sponsor you all the way to Herald once the tournament ends, assuming you can overcome the other barriers yourself. Again, very, very generous. And we find out more about this a little bit later. And lastly, Eithan, he basically holds his feet to the fire. And he says, all right, so I'm giving up a weapon here. And Reigan Shen corrects him, and it's like the opportunity to get a weapon. You don't have it. But Eithan sort of looks at him like, oh, come on, sweetie. We both know I would be more likely to get it than your people. So, I mean, you can take that gamble if you like, but we're here to fucking do this, so let's do it. And he says, I want the Soul Forge. And this is the first time Reigan Shen has actually indicated some resistance and reluctance to give Eithan what he wants. In the end, he agrees to do it because he apparently, and we don't have the information on this, is not in a position where the Soul Forge is an irreplaceable item the way that others might be, were they in possession of one. And Eithan really appreciates and like kind of even respects the fact that he doesn't pretend that he is in that position. He knows he can replace it. He seems to, do Eithan the credit of acknowledging, I think you're aware I could replace it. And eventually he agrees, but it's like the last thing that he will do beyond Eithan's final request of new clothes. And that is the end of that negotiation. So then we go to Yeren. This is very interesting. Yeren is fighting a demon, which is basically a remnant that's been like fed for training purposes and has gone off leash and is just kind of wreaking havoc. So she has to go in there and, use some of her new like ability to tap into her senses to fight this thing. And she manages it, and the people are, eventually begin to like cheer for her. But here comes some people from the, there's the Sage of Red Faith, Yan Shamay, and Kaelin Archer. And this is a very, very interesting interaction. I have been talking since the beginning about the role of privilege in these books. And it's something that Eithan thinks actively about, that reaching Herald is super expensive and that there would be many more of them if that weren't the case. You have to have a sponsor of some kind or come from a rich family to get where you are if you're a Herald. And it's repeatedly come up. Access to resources is the factor. And this conversation that Yeren has, it starts off with Yan Shamay she first says to Yeren, "Didn't your master teach you better than to fight in a town? Someone could have been hurt." To which Yeren is like, I'm sorry. You're with Red Moon Hall and you're trying to talk to me about the safety of bystanders in a town? Are you kidding me? And then Shumei walked up to a trio of little girls in the crowd nearby, going to her knees and speaking in a soothing tone. "It's going to be okay. The demon is gone, and we won't let anything happen to you." She still sounded like a witch trying to lure them to their deaths. The girls stammered something and scurried back, scrambling to put some adults between themselves and the evil-looking underlady. The adults didn't look any more at ease than the children did. Yan Shomei hung her head, and Yeren could see the depression and disappointment radiating from her back. Ouch. This girl clearly is wanting to, be a person, and the path that she's on has made it so that can't happen. And I felt immediate sympathy. And Yeren has to, tell herself, no sympathy, don't do it. But as for me and my house, we shall pity this girl, because this really put everything in a whole new light. First of all, the sage tries to convince Yeren to join in with him. And when Yeren throws these other two in with the sage, the way that she talks about this path, they both get very resentful at Yeren, painting them all with the same brush. As far as Kaelin and Yan Shamay are concerned, they are not with the sage in the way that Yeren thinks they are. And that, again, immediately really interesting. They apparently see this guy as some means to an end, but they don't believe in what it seems like we all assumed the cults believed. And they don't have a trust in him. There's not that sort of relationship there. So eventually he's trying to get her roped into this. She will not like even entertain this conversation. Eventually, he can sense that her master is nearby, and he's like, fine, I have to fucking go. And she is left with these two by themselves. And when the Blood Sage, like, makes a move toward her, she lashes out at him, and she actually manages to injure him, and he is super duper excited about it, and, like, tries to show her, see, I told you, you're really, really good at this, but she's just not interested. So he leaves, and Kaelin says, we are not your enemies. I'm an admirer. I hope we don't have to fight. And Yaren, initially, she's just like, what? No, shut up. Of course you want to fight. What are you talking? Again, all of this goes in direct opposition to how she has been telling herself this story for so long. And she says, dread god cults are enemies to anybody with eyes. Kaelin's expression grew sober, and Chaumet darkened. Not everyone has a family to pick up the bill for their training. And Yaren says something about, like, Red Moon emissaries fucked up the Black Flame Empire. I'm not sorry for you. Red Moon or the Phoenix? Jan Chaumet countered. And are you responsible for everything the Akura clan has done? What about the Aurelius family? Kaelin spoke calmly. I think you may have a misunderstanding about us. Dread God Madra gives you a way to improve without spending a fortune. If you want to advance, but you were born in a gutter, you don't have much choice. And she's sort of like thinking about this, but she doesn't really believe it yet. I feel like it's coming. But this is a pretty neat idea that I feel like Will is playing with here, which is to say, he has found a path that most people would disdain and assign. It's stigmatized. But due to that fact, or maybe in conjunction with that fact, it's something that is open to people who don't have other resources available and other support systems available. It's sort of like a gang, but in a way that's like much more internally productive. And I have a lot of sympathy for these two. As somebody who grew up without a lot of resources, when you are around people who do have them, it's impossible as a child to really understand what that feeling is. You can't put a name to it. It's not until you get older that you look back and you see all of the things that friends of yours had that you kind of just vaguely wondered why you didn't have it. It wasn't even like a resentment when you were a kid. It was just a kind of confusion. And if you had a decent relationship with your parents, I think a lot of us sort of trusted they would do that if they could. I guess we just can't. Not really thinking much further into why can't we? I know one of the first times that I really encountered that was all of my friends in like the 3rd and 4th grade were joining the Brownies. And I couldn't do it because we didn't have the money for like the membership fees and everything. So all of these friends of mine began to grow closer because they were spending a lot of time after school and outside of school together doing projects and stuff. And I began to feel more and more like apart from them because I wasn't involved in the things they were doing. I didn't know about the stories they were telling each other and the inside jokes. And it was just, and it wasn't like my parents didn't want to give me that, but they couldn't. And this went on with like in summer, there was a lot of my friends who went to summer camp. I didn't have that. Summer camp is a fortune. I still think about how much money these parents must have had to send more than one child, by the way, to summer camp. And I'm just like, good God. And when you have resources like that, it's really, really easy to not give credit to people who are doing without, because it hasn't even necessarily occurred to you that you're doing without. And Yaren has definitely been put through the ringer in terms of her training, but she was trained by a sage who discovered her and helped her and took her under his wing. So that in itself was a resource that is beyond what most people would ever be able to lay hands on in their lifetime. And even Lindon after where he came from and the way he was treated, he lucked into this amazing position where he is being looked after and sponsored by more than one very powerful family. And, you know, Lindon, I think, is more aware than Yaren is of the advantages that they're being granted. But I think this is incredibly interesting that these two are doing what they can to advance, but don't necessarily have a better relationship with their blood shadow and that kind of path than Yaren does. They are embracing it because they have to, but not necessarily because they're more comfortable with it or because they they believe in it and think it's the right thing to do. It's clear we have been in the minds of some people who, you know, there was that bit of what the egg, I think is what the guy called it when we were inside his head, was it the beginning of Skysworn? But he wasn't even like a disciple, really. He got like kind of possessed by the thing. It was a weird situation. And I'm wondering about Yan Shamay won that battle with that scream that sort of sent the blood shadow out of her. And there's a sense that she just didn't want to use it if she could help it. I don't know. This whole thing is fascinating to me. And I kind of enjoy that they're attempting to like befriend Yaren. I feel bad that she rebuffs them the way that she does, but it wouldn't feel in character if she didn't. She has to react this way. She's Yaren. But the reveal that maybe not everybody who is part of this path is part of that destruction is really compelling. I'm always into the idea of factions within factions. You know, everybody isn't a monolith. I like that. So yeah, this is just, I'm interested. And I love when she says something about how like, all right, I don't have a problem with you guys, but I am definitely going to cut your sage's fucking head off. And literally both of them are like, go ahead. Okay. Like, fuck that guy. I don't care. Go, please. Indeed. Do it now. That'd be great. So, okay. Then we go to 11 and this is so good. I really wanted this and I didn't know I wanted it. We get the POV of two different people from Lindon's team and the way that they see him. So Matin Kai is one of the twins that he mentions earlier, not knowing which is which. And she's thinking about how her team leader is obsessed with points and is low-key a little bit crazy. And they come up against these bandits. They weren't opportunistic thieves so much as they were desperate people who had been displaced by the flood of dread beasts. While most had sought shelter with the Akura clan factions, some had been unable or unwilling to, for whatever reason. They stole what they could from evacuees and Akura patrols, but they were rarely a threat. So she sends a message to Lindon. And she's like, so, hey, we found some bandits. They're in our way, so we're going to take a different route. It's going to delay us about 8 hours, but it shouldn't be a big deal. She sends this message and almost immediately gets a message back. And he's like, oh, hey, I'm coming. And he doesn't even stop to explain what he's doing. He just goes straight past her and her sister. And she immediately assumes he is going in there to murder everybody. All of these bandits, whom she clearly has some sympathy for. And this is so... Lindon was truly merciless. He was going to butcher these people. And then she comes across them. And in like a matter of minutes, he has disabled every person and not killed them. Some were bound with simple constructs. Others were groaning and helpless on the ground. Others were in the process of surrendering voluntarily. And Lindon sees this and immediately is like, hey, can you bring some of these people back that are passed out? And she's just standing there like, holy shit. How did he do this? And it's another instance similar to when he went up against the Skysworn and Narusea, or not Narusea, Naru, help me out, guys. But yeah, he disables everybody, even though it's really would have been easier, and everybody knows it would have been easier for them to kill them. Like, the fact that they restrain themselves is them adding an extra, like, layer of obstacle on top of it that isn't absolutely necessary, and proves the good intention, or at least, you know, the attempt at it behind what they're doing. Narugway, thank you guys. So yeah, she's just standing there like, good fucking God. And I love him being like, is there anything else that I can do to help before I go? Well, all right, I'll see you tonight. And he takes off, takes the Dread Beast binding on the way out, and the two of them are just standing there like, holy shit. It's so good. So then we go to Grace, who we haven't seen in a minute. I don't think we've had a POV from her at all. I think this is the first one. And Grace is feeling away because this little boy has stolen her shit. And he tricked her by telling her, oh, I'm going to be a courier and get you your points. And, you know, I'll take a little fee, but I'll bring everything in for you for sure. And she believed him. And then it becomes very quickly clear that he was going to just take shit. So she's trying to chase this guy who is just a step ahead of her the whole time. And she's irritated. And finally, everything gets brought to a halt because Lindon has shown up and caught him, who turns out to be a she. And she is super embarrassed. She didn't even want Lindon to know this had happened. So the fact that he has stepped in and kind of caught her in the midst of this is just like a little bit humiliating. And the fact that Grace is like, not only was this person one step ahead of her the whole time, like during the fight with her trying to catch them, but they managed to pull off an illusion that had her thinking it was a boy. Both of those things are really just like, you know, they're again, really embarrassing. Like her realization that she would never have been able to catch this girl because she would have been on the entire wrong track when she was trying to find them. So Lindon handles this person. Apologies, but why are you stealing from us? I need points. Understandable. Instead of stealing from our team, Lindon suggested, why don't you steal for us? Now that was the Lindon she knew. Oh, I am very excited for sneaky Lindon to be back. It's not like he's ever really gone, but he has been able to be very straightforward about things most of the time. And I can't wait to see sneaky Lindon again. I missed him so much. Evil One says harem building Lindon mode. Ew. Don't say that. The idea that he's just like, oh, I'm being nice to these bitches so I can make it. Don't. Ew. Gross. No. Lindon is just a good boy. Stop it. So we go to Lindon, who is absolutely as obsessed with points as ever. It has not waned, not even a little. They are way ahead of everybody else, but he is still unsatisfied, which, like, when you get into that kind of headspace, I completely understand that obsession. I had this happen on, like, a stupid, like, iPad game the other day, where it was, like, a brief one-day competition against, you know, random other players to get the most points in this game. And I am really good at that particular game. And I absolutely could not stop playing all day. It was just like, it was not good. It was not good. I came in second place. I was like double the score of the person in third place. And I was still so pissed that I didn't come in first place. It's just like, when you get like this, there's just no talking you down from it. You kind of just have to like roll with it, you know? So the problem was their expenses. He scavenged or made everything himself whenever possible, but oftentimes they had to buy scales or dead matter or simple constructs using points. Sometimes it felt like he had to spend 5 points to make 6. Another problem was the size of his team. So here is my question that I asked last time, him addressing it, or failing to address it really, because he says to himself, I do need to figure out what we're going to do about the prizes, but I'm absolutely not even going to think about that until we've actually won them all, which I guess that makes sense. There's no point worrying about it now, but I am very much eyeballing him. I appreciate, though, that he's clearly intending to share. So at least that can be set to rest, because I was pretty sure he wasn't going to be a total dick and just take everything. But the way he was talking, it felt that way. So I was like, all right, I just need this clarified, buddy. So he is in charge of the evacuation situation. And there are a lot of people looking up to him as an underlord who he has to sort of like put on the underlord face to deal with them. And we see one woman who like pushes herself to the breaking point because she doesn't want to be seen as weak. And he tries to be gentle with her until she's finally like, well, I wasn't going to be the weak one. And he finally snaps and is like, I am in command. I am not losing a member for any reason. Do you understand me? And finally she's like, okay, because there are just people like that. When you aren't somebody who likes to be harsh, but you are somebody who tends to be thrust into leadership positions, you have to get used to taking this attitude with people. And it can feel really unnatural and kind of asshole-ish. But when you think about where you were as somebody looking for a leader, sometimes that doesn't even feel asshole-ish when you're on the receiving end of it. It just feels like they're telling me what's expected of me. And it's much more, it's not as personal as it feels when you're the one doing it. So I appreciated that he has to suddenly like stop and tell himself it's time to be an underlord right now. Or rather, Dross tells him, because Dross is like, you're fucking bad at this, dude. Get it together. Be an underlord. But yeah, I completely relate to that, because I have been in leadership positions a number of times, and I always struggle with not wanting to be a dick, even though I'm in charge and people aren't doing what they're supposed to fucking do. And it's just a really tough act to balance, you know? So this is when he runs across fucking Daji. And we get to see the hollow domain, which apparently they've gone with that name. And it works like a charm. All of his enforcing goes out. And it's honestly so satisfying to see this technique used for the first time and it be Daji. I couldn't imagine a better person to be on the receiving end of this. I'm so delighted. And he grips Daji up and gets fucking angry. And is like, first of all, I'm surrounded by golds, and apparently you don't give a fuck, and you were about to kill them all. Second of all, I didn't want to kill your brother. I defended myself. I gave him a chance to walk away, as I am about to do for you. And I didn't, I let him leave, and he chose not to do that. I don't know what you fucking people want from me. And I was pretty impressed that when he lets Daji go, Daji does actually leave. I thought he might turn around and attempt one last crack at Lindon, but I think that he has a sense that he's way out of his league here. And he starts to say something about how he also let Harmony have a choice, but he stops himself because he can sense all of the Akuras around him, and he's like, okay, I'm not going to mention that actually. But yeah, this whole thing was very, very satisfying. I love when Lindon gets truly angry, because it doesn't happen very often, and it's always justified and sort of a long time coming by the time it occurs. Daji is just such a dick too. And the fact that he sort of backed down here feels like maybe he heard Lindon despite himself and really internalized that a little bit. I don't know, maybe not. Daji isn't smart, who knows, but I would like to think so. So Pride says something to Lindon. It is better to put enemies in your debt than to kill them, in a way that to me says that Pride is sort of beginning to respect Lindon against his better judgment, and he resents it, but nevertheless, he's like showing some approval here, which is very rare for him. So, I'll take what I can get. So then we have this last moment here with Yaren and the Blood Shadow. You guys, Show of hands, how many people thought the blood shadow had eaten the rabbit? The moment that it was like it was holding something white, I was baking in my kitchen listening to this, and I just like blurted out, "No, the bunny!" Like I just said it. And it wasn't, she just wanted to hold the bunny, and you guys, I couldn't handle it at all. What a perfect follow-up to the conversation in the town, too. Yeren has so many assumptions based on her experience with what the Blood Shadow did and her experience with Red Moon Hall. All of this stuff is understandably coloring her idea of what these people are. And I mean, as a reader, we have been suckered into this 1000%. I can't tell you guys how much I love when writers do this and let you believe what their characters believe, not in a way that feels like a trick, just in a way that feels like, well, you just didn't have all the information. It's such a real life thing. There are so many like subjects in life that I spoke of with such authority at one time or another in my life that I look back and I'm like, oh my God, I literally had no idea what I was talking about. This is so embarrassing. And it's like, you were ignorant, but when you are ignorant, that's a part of it is inherent to ignorance is not knowing that you don't know any better. So you can't even like think to reach out for more information because you assume you have it all already. I just think this is so cool. So yeah, she wakes up and this fucking thing is out of her and sitting at this table, which right there is absolutely chilling that it got out while she was asleep. This is something that Yeren thought about happening way back in like the Black Flame book, I think. She thought about how, what if it got out while she was asleep? And at the time, I think I said, oh God, I hate that idea. And now here it's fucking happening. And I hate it. I hate it just as much, even knowing that maybe this thing isn't quite what I thought. I still don't like that it's like part of Yeren and yet she doesn't have control over it in any way. Part of it's probably the fact that she's attempting to deny it. She doesn't want to admit that it's part of her, and she is getting disapproval from other masters. We'll talk about this in a second. It's holding the little white thing, and I'm thinking, oh my God, it's eating this bunny. Oh my God. And it turns out that she is changing its bandage. It sniffed the air and looked at Yeren curiously. Its bandage was fresh and clean, and only then did Yeren notice the roll of new bandages sitting to the Blood Shadow's right. Yeren's thoughts felt like they crawled as she tried to put the picture together. The Blood Shadow had crept out of her spirit without her noticing, and it had used that time to sneak into another hut, steal an injured baby rabbit, and hold it while eating Yeren's food. The shadow hissed and pulled the bunny closer to its chest as though afraid Yeren was going to steal it. And when Yeren says you fattening that up before you eat it, it says you got to hold it. Ah, all it wants is to hold the bunny, you guys. I'm legit emotional. It's like a little child that just wants her to like take care of it and love it and let it be and fight and eat like a person. And it's just so lonely. Why are we alone? No need to be here. Rather lose together than win alone. That stuck in Yeren like an arrow. She didn't want to be here, where the winter sage saw her master instead of her, and the other students treated her like she had descended from the heavens. But she couldn't leave, and she couldn't lose. It would be a betrayal of her master's memory. And the sage would have her sensing the sword icon well before Archlord. That was an opportunity only a blind fool would pass up. It's no account of yours anyway. I'll sink or swim without you." Her bloody reflection sneered. "Good luck." Girl, I'm not trying to say everything is up to your blood shadow, but what I'm saying is it's time for you to open your arms and accept this thing as a part of you that, like, isn't going away and deserves maybe not the contempt you've been flinging at it. And maybe your buddies can help you with that. I know you don't trust them yet, but it's worth a conversation. I mean, it's clear the sage is very, like, prejudiced against it, telling her to starve it. Ouch. You know, like, I don't know. It just sort of reminds me of being really harsh with somebody who has, like, maybe addiction issues or something. And the way that she talks about Yeren and this creature, it feels like she really is so contemptuous of it being a part of her at all and holds it against her specifically in a way that's very personal. Even though Yeren didn't choose for this thing to be part of her life. She was a child and it was like attacking, you know? So I am fascinated to see where this goes and super excited about the turn it's taking because I never saw this coming at all. And what a fun little, like, wrench to throw in everything. I want to know if she does embrace it more, what does it turn into? What does it look like, you know? And can she have friends that are, like, on a similar path that aren't Lindon? You know, Lindon and she have pretty much just got each other. Mercy still doesn't feel like an integral member of their team in the way that I wanted. They like her, and they trust her definitely to a point, you know, but it's not the same. I would kind of like Yeren to have other friends that she can train with and learn from. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe the Sage of Red Faith wouldn't be the worst idea just to get a little bit more info. I'm just spitballing here. So yeah, I am going to have to wrap this up, but I'm fascinated. I'm into it. I can't believe how hard it was to stop reading at this point. You guys, you don't know how hard. But I will be seeing you all again tomorrow, 6 p.m. Central Time for another recording. So until then, thank you, Andy. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.